Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm doing a walkthrough for the active Hack the Box machine. It's covered in both the TJNull and LainKusanagi list, and it's a good machine to practice Active Directory attacks. So let's get started. We start by doing a port scan. I use the auto recon tool, and usually port scanning takes some time. So I prepared this and we can have a look at the results. To do this, usually I start a Python HTTP server in the directory with the results. And then I can easily browse it in my web browser. We see port 88, which is for Kerberos. So we are dealing with a domain controller here. Let's have a look at the SMB port. And let's first have a look at the enum for Linux scan. And we see the domain name is active.htb and the computer name is DC. So let's add this to our hosts file. We also check the SMB client and we see there are two non-default shares, replication and users. So we can try if we can authenticate with an anonymous authentication and access one of these shares. We can use any SMB client. I'm using the one from Impacket. And I specify empty string for like no user provided, which means the anonymous authentication. And we can see if we see the shares, we do. So let's use the replication and see what we can find here. So we see there is a groups.xml file and it contains information about group policy settings. And it can also contain credentials. So this is something interesting and we want to see this. So let's check. So we see here a username. It's SVC TGS. And we see there's a password. But this password is encrypted. The good thing for us is that this is basically broken. We can easily decrypt it. If we check the Microsoft documentation, we can see the private key is public, so we can just decrypt this string. We copy it. And we can use the command gpp-decrypt. And we see the password. So we can use now these credentials to use into the SMB share and see if we find something new. Let's check the users share. And we see there's the user flag. So we have the first flag. But other than that, nothing interesting here. So let's use netexec and see what kind of access we have. Let's see if we can access WinRM. We define our user and password. We say we want to check the WinRM. Let's check with WMI. Let's check RDP. So one very good resource whenever you deal with Active Directory is this Mindmap. It's from Orange Cyber Defense, and they have different versions. And it gives you some structure how you can proceed with Active Directory. So you see here, this is the starting point when you don't have any credentials. You can start scanning the network. You want to find the domain controller IP. You can check for anonymous SMB shares, enumerate LDARP, and so on. And eventually you might get usernames. So once you have some usernames, you go to the next step. The next step is the blue box. You see here we have a valid user, but no password. So what can we do? We can use password spray. We can do AS rep roast. And eventually we might find some clear text credentials. So you go to the next box, you have valid credentials. What can you do next? So you perform classic enumeration and so on. I think you get the gist. So it's really helpful if you need some structure how to perform enumeration on Active Directory and how you can attack it. So we have one valid credential pair. We have a username and a password. And the next thing we want to do is to find all the available users in the domain. So we are currently in this green box. We have valid credentials. And what we can do now is classic enumeration. And we want to find all users. We have different options. We can use netexec to find all users. So let's try this. And we see the different domain users. It's not much, it's just our current user. And then we see there's the administrator and there's also the guest. So if we go back to our cheat sheet, we can, for example, perform now Bloodhound enumeration. So what I usually do is I try to find the low-hanging fruits first. This means I check for users that are vulnerable to AS rep roast or for service accounts that are vulnerable to curb roasting. So let's check this. Again, we can use netexec, we use LDAP, and we can use the command asreproast, and we want to store the hash in this file. It says no entries found. Okay. So let's try to enumerate for curb roasting. Again, we use netexec. This time we use the curb roasting command, and we also need to define the KDC host. Let's run it, and we see we found something. We see we can do curb roasting with the administrator. So we see here's the file with the hash, and let's try to crack it. I use hashcat. We need to use this mode, which you can easily find in the documentation. We specify our hash that we just stored, and I'm using the RockU word list. And we see we were able to crack the hash, and the password is Ticketmaster 1968. So let's validate these credentials. We try to authenticate to SMB with the administrator and the password. And we see they work. And we also see pound here, which means we can try to use psexec to connect to the machine. So we define our user with the password and the host, and we are connected. And you see we have system privileges. And we can see here is the root flag. So we successfully escalated our privileges. I hope you enjoyed this video and see you next time.